Mr. José Manuel de la Riva, President of AMETIC, has the floor.
Muchísimas gracias, Rector.
Thank you very much, Rector. For me, it's a pleasure and an honor to be here today at this opening session of the 28th meeting on telecommunications and digital economy, organized by AMETIC together with the Telefónica Foundation and the Menéndez Pelayo International University. I would first like to welcome the Minister for joining us today, and we know that he has had to make a major effort to come here, the Secretary of State, the Regional Minister of Industry of the region of Cantabria, and all the authorities that are at this opening event. I would also like to thank the chairman of the most important companies in the sector that are here today and the top executives that are with us. And thanks to all of you for attending this event, where we have tried to focus the discussion on the European challenge. Why the European challenge? Why are we going to discuss this aspect during the next 4 days? Undoubtedly, there is an extremely important event, the election of the new Commission, and this means that for the next 5 years we'll have a European government in charge of carrying out the digital transformation in Europe. And this means that Europe has to recover the digital leadership it had and no longer has. And we are all going to collaborate in this effort. We're going to discuss this. And we're going to put to your consideration a number of presentations, proposals of all kinds. And I would like to briefly reflect on the content of this meeting, which we believe is extremely rich, diverse, because of the quality of the speakers and the companies that are with us here. The presentations have been structured around an analysis of the current situation. Those are points 1 to 2. Points 3 to 7 will discuss the causes of the situation, why this has happened in our opinion, and at the end we're going to propose a number of suggestions, reflections, conclusions for governments, authorities, both Spanish and European authorities. And I would like to say that these conclusions, or this presentation I'm going to give, and I'm going to try to be as concise as possible because it's very extensive, but this is the result of the consensus and the opinions of the companies that belong to AMETIC. AMETIC represents the digital sector in Spain with approximately 4,500 companies from all sectors in the world of the digital economy, what we call the ICT hyper sector. And this has been the result of debates held in the sectoral areas of the committees and the work groups. So I would clearly like to say that this is the consensus opinion of AMETIC. So this is what we're proposing for discussion. I would also like to say that during this discussion process, we have been helped by many of the companies that are here today, and I would like to thank them for their contribution. And talking about the figures, the situation in Spain, the sector in 2013 continued to drop. It dropped less than previous years, but unfortunately it's still dropping. We know that the trend is going to change. It's already changing in 2014, but the fact is that we've still had a drop, and we have an accumulated drop of 18% to the end of 2013. And this is really worrying. On the left, we have the various sectors in the hyper sector, the various AMETIC sectors, consumption, electronics, industrial electronics, information technologies, digital services and contents, and computer technologies. This long, gradual drop means that demand is not being stimulated and there is no digital transformation of the production sectors. This means that information technologies are a transversal sector that affects all the economy, all economic sectors. And this horizontal transformation that should have been carried out and which would have meant increasing the demand and the use of ICTs at our companies in any sectors to make them more competitive and to give them a better position. But this has not been done. Deindustrialization, unfortunately, companies have been lost, and this means that the production fabric has dropped, employment has dropped, the number of companies has dropped, especially SMEs, technology-based SMEs, and particularly in the service and consulting sectors where we have more SMEs, and over 90% of the AMETIC companies belong to that segment, and there has been a destruction in the production fabric. And this inevitably has gone together with a drop in investments in innovation. And this has had an even more negative effect because the cutbacks in public aid for R&D, both in the public and private segments, mean that many projects that were underway have been stopped. The telecommunication and data transmission infrastructures are being deployed, but there are difficulties because of the delays in the digital regulations and the general telecommunications regulation, which has recently been approved and which we highly value, and we also highly value the consensus behind it. But we need to have regulations to implement it. And then we also have uncertainties about the development of broadband and issues that without a doubt affect the future of companies. In Spain, a major investment effort is being made in infrastructures, but this should be accompanied by clear regulations, predictable regulations that run ahead and not behind events. And finally, we can see that there is also another factor that we're very concerned about and which we have analyzed at AMETIC, and that is that there are not sufficient qualifications in the digital world, and we're not training our students for future needs. And technical schools are reducing the enrollment levels in studies related to ICTs, and we will have to pay for this in the future. This is difficult to understand, but we need to be aware of it in order to promote this development. And finally, the markets in Spain are not yet completely unified. There's a dispersion of regulations on autonomous region level, and this sometimes is a limitation for the deployment of infrastructures. And this doesn't shape a favorable perspective to be able to continue to make progress along this path. And let's see what's happening in the rest of the world, in Europe and in the rest of the world. On this slide, we can see the most significant geographic areas and the volume of the ICT sector globally and the growth in the last year. There are two major areas, North America and Asia, with a similar size, that are growing at a significant rate. And we have the European bloc, which is approximately 20% less and which isn't growing. The concentric circle in white shows growth, and in Europe there's no circle. Why? Because the weight of the ICT sector is going down. And if we look at it on this chart, with the four most important geographic areas regarding the correlation between the growth in GDP and the growth in the ICT sector, and this means that in Europe, the growth of the economy is not growing at the same rate as the ICT sector. And this chart has been produced at market prices, and that's why the figures may look high. But in Europe, there is a decrease, even though the economy is growing. It's not growing very much, but it's growing, while in other geographic areas, there's a correlation. So what is worrying is what is happening in Europe, why the digital world is not growing in Europe. So let's see what's happening in the two most important world geographic areas. What are the characteristics they have that we don't find in Europe? Starting with North America. North America, without a doubt, has an enviable technological leadership, a supply of technical resources which is also very valuable, and where there's a university sector of extremely high quality. The conditions to provide that competitiveness for the country, especially the support of innovative initiatives, support for startups, seed capital, investment capital, all this segment is highly developed. So any idea that may be of interest or value is supported with the necessary resources so that this will create a broth to develop companies that can become successful and become global players, as we've seen over and over again. The digital transformation of the various production sectors is taking place, and this means that they have a position of leadership that Europe doesn't have. If we look at the right, at the Asia-Pacific bloc, their technological position was more based on hardware, on the basic components, not so much in the world of content and applications. However, they're growing in that direction. There's intellectual capital that is growing at an enormous rate. In this growth, the segments are being very competitive, both in prices and in the capability to expand. And it's a very protectionist market, a very large internal market. So it's not easy for other geographic areas to get in. And that obviously gives them greater potential for growth and without a doubt very favorable regulations for the ICT world. And we have the examples of Korea, Japan, where there have been initiatives of an enormous significance to support ICT sectors. And in Europe, as I said at the beginning, we've lost digital leadership that we had 10, 15 years ago. Without a doubt, we were at the forefront. But this is due to many reasons. We've pointed to several here. There are no leaders in Europe in the world of the internet. There hasn't been a transformation of the production sectors to the digital world in general, although there are exceptions. There's also a regulatory framework that is very slow. European bureaucracy is very slow in decision making, and this makes it more difficult to promote competitiveness. There's been a reduction in investments, and the growth that has taken place in the world of e-trade has hardly produced value for the region. They pay very few taxes. Why? Because they're companies that operate globally and use structures, or let's say they use a tax system that doesn't contribute to producing growth or employment in Europe. We see that the initiatives that are being taken in Europe in relation to the 2020 agenda and the processes that realize that Europe needs to be re-industrialized and improve their share of the GDP, but the goals are not being attained. We're now going to start to describe the causes. Why has this happened? This change is taking place globally. And what are the vectors that regulate this change? We have defined three vectors. One is the consumer revolution, we've called it, the revolution of the production sectors, and the revolution in digital production itself. If we focus on the variables that guide the consumer right now, the digital consumer is somebody that is keen to experiment things. User experience carries more and more weight. The current consumer wants to share their experiences. They want to have a social experience with an enormous number of citizens that share an affinity or an interest, and this means that opinions are generated extremely quickly. A concept, an idea becomes vigorous in a very short period of time or disappears, and this means that the consumers that know very well the instruments they choose or they use, know how to choose, know how to compare, and this means that the service and content providers have to constantly change our supply, so that this experienced consumer that is always looking for the best price with the best quality in the lowest period of time, we need to be capable to satisfy their demands. The innovation of the production sectors is reflected in this slide, where we've broken down the value segments in 5 blocks, starting from left to right with the digital content, then the services or applications, the support technologies, the devices and interfaces for access, and the network and interconnectivity. The economy in general is being affected by the digital impact through changes in the model, changes in the way of doing business, new ideas about companies and business models that didn't exist a very short time ago. Here are some examples. We could think of many more. But what is clear is that nothing is permanent today. Any business model is tremendously impacted by the digital world and the internet, and they have not reacted efficiently in all sectors. And we can see that some sectors are very limited, and outside competition is affecting them seriously. And the digital world would be the next change vector in the digital world, and it's shown in this slide. On the left, we have a paradigm, an iceberg. On the left, we have the world of content, where we can see the generation of value, where the user sees what affects them, and where the results of the decisions, initiatives are more clearly seen, where there are fewer entry barriers, where the investments are lower, and when the return on the investment is very fast. We're tired of seeing companies that have been revalued in a very short period of time. It's been exponential. And it's a sector that's very dynamic, again, as I said, with a few entry barriers and a few investment requirements. And on the right, we have graphically expressed the major infrastructures that are required to maintain the networks and services and servers that support the value change, the great computational centers, the cloud services. All this requires an enormous investment, highly qualified intellectual capital, and yet it's suffering an excess of regulation, a very high tax pressure, and also, let's say, a pressure to lower prices. And with this scenario, it's difficult for business models to be sustainable. When we have an enormous need to invest to maintain infrastructures, to provide services that require more and more higher and higher speeds, and yet want to pay less for them. So there's this general idea that infrastructures are just there, they'll always be there, there's no cost, and people don't value what is underwater, the part of the iceberg we can't see. And what the user wants is just to receive the applications that they like, they're entertained by. So what's happening with all these vectors? Well, in Europe, we're standing there looking at the labyrinth or the maze, and we don't know which way to go, or we're not choosing the proper way to go. Perhaps because there's too much atomization in decision-making. Europe is a very complicated puzzle where there are many countries that sometimes have contradictory interests, and the European government perhaps is not sufficiently agile to realize that this is happening, and that our real competition isn't between European countries, but between geographic regions. And this means that Europe has practically come to a standstill. Here we have recent data from the month of July from the European Parliament. The cost of the non-unification of digital markets in Europe. The cost of non-unification is said to be around 800 billion euros. This would carry a weight that is estimated at 520 billion for the digital world. But even so, there's a brutal impact of 4% of the European GDP. And in the top chart on the left, there's a comparison of the digital market with the general market unification. And in yellow, it's the financial sector. The free trade agreement between North America and Europe, for example, has a much lower impact, although a lot is said about it. So the unification of the digital markets has an enormous impact, and this is something that we have to tackle. On this slide, we can see something that also draws our attention. If we look at the top 10 internet companies worldwide, in 2013, there were 9 from the US, 1 from China, 0 European. And this is not related to earnings, but to users. In 2014, we have 4 Chinese, 6 American, 0 European. If we talk about the world's top high tech companies, there are only 8 European companies. There used to be more, and it seems that the figure is dropping. And this clearly reflects what I was referring to, the loss of competitiveness of Europe and leadership in the digital world. The European Parliament has recognized this. They are aware of it, and that's why we believe that the future European legislation will tackle this seriously, but for us it's vital and a priority. What recommendations would we make at AMETIC for the Union? We need to develop a legislative we have to develop legislation quickly, oriented at investments, simplification, reindustrialization, industrial plans, and especially an entrepreneurial climate that will help the sector grow. In the case of Spain, this is a reflection of the situation in Europe. We've made progress in many areas, but we still have unfinished business. The first would be to continue to progress in the Spanish digital agenda. The reforms that the government has started, but which we feel need to continue with, which affect the financial market and the labour market, but they are also fundamental to create this entrepreneurial and investment culture to generate wealth. And in the industry, we know that there's a new plan for industrial development. We want to put more emphasis on the ICT world and create relevant programs that will take into account innovation in public procurement and R&D&I. So we want a transformation of the production sectors and also put an emphasis on better adapting training to the needs of the digital world. And also in summary, we're going to refer to the 7 pillars that can help the digital economy prosper. And this has to do with the concepts that we've mentioned, macroeconomic stability, efficiency of the institutions, suitable intellectual capital, efficiency of the financial market so that money will flow to the companies, major innovation in businesses, infrastructure is also very important, and extensive and robust markets. These are the 7 pillars that would support the digital economy and which would bring about what we've called the virtuous circle of the digital economy. This virtuous circle means that with suitable planning and regulation, with the financial resources, the human capital, and the innovation component, we can get the ideas and projects to prosper, to generate new uses, new demands, and this will serve as a tractor for services and generate resources that will make it possible to continue to develop innovative alternative ideas. And when this circle starts to turn, this virtuous circle of the digital economy, and as I said, other geographic regions have already done this, and this will produce a major flow of ideas, resources, projects, and development of infrastructures, which without a doubt will pull the market and pull the economy in general.
Just to end up, I would like to remind that where there is a good message, Europe should recover its leadership in the digital world. And it's the right momentum right now. Spain and its ICT will be able to face such a European challenge. Thank you very much for your attention.